right, so first and foremost, welcome to the Leadership Blend. I'm your host, Ricardo D. Rice, and this is episode 6. So I'm keeping up with the episodes. So we're rolling right along. All right, so this week we're doing something a little differently because as you notice, I'm standing up because I am very animated, and I accept that. And sitting behind the desk was a little cringing for me. So I'm going to stand today, and I know you see all this stuff on the board today. We're going to get to a lot of this stuff, but we may not. But that's the reason you tune into episodes, so that we can go over so many different things in so many different episodes. So today we're going to start with the idea checklist. So I'm going to veer a little bit from all the governmental stuff that we've been talking about because I think we've gotten the gist of it. You know, why you want to be incorporated, what is your mission statement, your vision statement, your core values, your goals. We pretty much ran over all of those things. But before we get into this, I will say for the umpteenth time, because I cannot stress this enough, you guys have got to get those things down. And it may not happen in a day, and it may not happen in a week, but you definitely have to get your mission statement because your mission statement will segue you into all the things that we're going to go over. You know, when we talk about your social media, most of the time the stuff that you're going to say is going to be based off your mission statement. When we talk about your 10 questions, a lot of times your mission statement will answer a good fraction of all these questions. Even with your idea checklist, your mission statement is like the cornerstone of everything you do. So that's why you definitely want to make sure that you sit down, that you really think about it, because your mission statement, again, is going to be less than a paragraph, but probably around 1 sentence to 2 sentences, and it should encompass everything that your organization is going to do. Now, when I say organization, that still includes ministry, because a lot of times that's what we're segueing to. We're talking about your ministry, your church, whether you be an evangelist, whether you be an elder, you know, all these facets will still factor into who you are as a person. And when we start having a conversation about social media, that's where it comes down to. Because a lot of these social media outlets, some of them are personal outlets. But I'm not going to get into that first. I know everybody wants that. We're not going to get into that first. We're going to get into the idea checklist. All right, so what is the idea checklist? So let's say, and when I say idea, again, this spans every genre, so this includes your ministry. So because we're probably talking about ministry, let's start there. So when we talk about your idea checklist, that still includes your ministry. So when God gives you your ministry, you want to be able to ask certain questions. One, does it solve other people's problems? Now look, we know that Jesus solves problems. But if he gives you a specific ministry for a specific people or a specific genre of people, there's usually a need amongst those people. So if you say that God has called you to the men's ministry, you have to take the time and do the research to discover what is going on with men. You know, is it a health issue? Is it a community issue? So there's still some issue within the people that God has called you to. Number 2, do a lot of people have this problem? Typically, you know, when we talk about prophecy, you start getting into a lot of individuality and things of that magnitude. But typically, you know, people have problems because we're human. So, you know, but you want to be specific about that problem. So again, going back to the men's problem, if we say that God has called us to men's, let's say he's called us to African American men, then you definitely want to do your research and say, okay, well, you know, African American men, especially older men, are not getting colons checked or they're not getting their health checkups. And let's say that's the area you want to focus on. So then you discover that a lot of people probably do have that problem in that community, and that's why you've been called to that community. Now, the next one, am I passionate about the idea? I cannot stress passion enough. Passion is that thing that fuels you when nothing else does. Like, I have a passion for leadership. So I cringe whenever I'm a part of a ministry and the leadership team is not as strong as it could be. Or I cringe whenever I'm a part of an organization and the leadership is weak. That's a passion of mine. So that is what led me to do a radio show, to do a TV show, because that's a passion of mine. Now, if God has called you to something, there should be a passion for it. So if you said that God has called you to the men's ministry and you haven't done anything with the men's in 3 years, you might want to check your passion level. Because even when nothing else fuels you, passion is that thing on the inside that will wake you up at night, or it won't let you sleep at night, or it's waking you first thing in the morning and you're all over the place trying to figure out what you want to do. That's passion. And passion is not something somebody can teach you. It's either there or it is not there. So you definitely want to make sure that you have the passion for it. Next, which goes in line with this next question. Am I willing to commit the next 5 to 10 years of my life to this idea? Now, if God has called you to something, you're supposed to be committed. You're supposed to be sold out. You know, you're supposed to be on the journey. You're supposed to be on destiny's trail. So, you know, you definitely should be vested, because that's the key word, vested in what God has called you to. But if you can't see yourself doing it for the next 5 to 10 years, then again, you might want to check your passion, because your passion will fuel you when there's nothing else around you saying you can do this. Your passion will be like, yes, you can do this because God has called you to do it, and it has to be done, and it has to be done by you. And I always think about Moses when we talk about the parting of the Red Sea, and everybody likes to go to that parable. But my thought process on Moses was, even when he was put on the Nile and was floating down and was picked up by the palace people and all the stuff that he went through, the parting of the Red Sea for me is big because only he could do it. Only Moses was called to part the Red Sea. It was attached to his hand, and it was attached for him to get that particular job done. The same thing with your own ministry. If God has called you to a ministry, that means it's been called to your hand. That means you have to get it done, and only you can do it. So you have to make sure that you have the passion, and that when you say God has called you to something, He's actually called you to it, and you will know it because you have the passion to get it done, even when nothing else comes together. When we left off, we were asking, are you willing to commit to it for 5 to 10 years, for the next 5 to 10 years? And I was saying, in the example of Moses and about people being called to something and only you've been called or chosen to do it. And I was saying that's why I love Moses, because only Moses was commissioned to part the Red Sea. It was for Moses to do. Joshua couldn't do it. Deborah couldn't do it. It was attached to Moses' hand to part the Red Sea. And of course, he did other great things, but everybody typically remembers the Red Sea. I mean, hey, who parts the ocean? And what God parts the ocean through you. So you got to remember that. If you're starting a nonprofit, or if you've been called to, we'll say, the men's ministry, there's a reason God has called you to the men's ministry. There's some work that has been attached to your hand that only you can get done, and you have to make sure that you tap into the passion. We love to say the Holy Ghost, but you want to tap into that passion, because that passion will fuel you to get you through those next 5 or 10 years. Because every day is not going to be sunshine, especially if you're talking about a nonprofit, because you're going to spend the bulk of your time trying to raise money to cover your operating costs and all your programs and your services. All right, next question. Are others successfully doing something similar? Now, you want to be careful with this, because in essence, it's kind of a for-profit ideology, but it still works in a nonprofit setting. Because there can be 50 churches on one corner, but if everybody is farming their particular part of the vineyard, then it won't matter, because you can go to this church because this church caters to men. You can go to this church because it caters to women. You can go to this. If everybody covers their niche that God has specifically called them to, having 50 churches on one corner won't make a difference, because everybody's in their significant part of the vineyard. So when we talk about the nonprofit sector, and there's a dying need for nonprofits, because again, remember, we're filling the gaps on what people actually need. We're covering those socioeconomic classes. We're helping the underdog. We're making sure the homeless get fed. So we're doing all these things. So in essence, there's never too many nonprofits. If anything, there's never enough nonprofits, especially now with the world we live in and the need that people have that are not being met. All right, next, does it have too many competitors? Again, that covers what I just said. It's not about competition. We're talking about ministry in particular. So it's not about competition, but I will take this on the verse side. So if you're thinking about starting a for-profit, that is something you want to think about. How much competition is out there? In previous videos, I did the Jesus Children's Daycare. And we were talking about Angela, and she wanted to start a Christian daycare center. Well, that's something she had to think about. If she's going to be in the Marietta, Georgia area, are there already 50 kids Christian daycares in that area? Because if it is, then she has to switch her focus from just being a daycare to be a niche specific daycare. Meaning her daycare caters to some particular niche that nobody else is doing. So with her, she said it was going to be a Christian daycare, and her mission statement encompassed everything Christian, that the environment was going to be Christian, the teachers were going to be Christian, things of that magnitude. And she probably have to go a step further and say that we'll have Christian activities. The kids will be having Bible studies and things of that magnitude. So in the for-profit world, that is something you want to think about. And I throw that out there because many of you probably will start an LLC, limited liability company, where you will actually want to make money. And we get into that and we think about the big names, TD Jakes, Creflo Dollar. They have their ministries, but then they have their LLCs where they'll write their books, they do their conferences, they actually bring in revenue for themselves. So I threw that out there for those of you who plan on having LLCs at some point, which I would advise most of you do. Because again, nonprofits, outside of grants and having to raise money, that's the bulk of what you'll be doing. All right, next, can I do something substantially different or better than others? Not necessarily in the nonprofit sector, but definitely in the for-profit sector. But even in the nonprofit sector, you want to perfect that God has given you. So if you say God has called you again to the men's ministry, you probably want to look around at other churches that you guys fellowship with and try to find out where that gap is. Let's say that Jerusalem down the street does a men's program on Sundays, but you discover that men really want to get together on Saturdays. You talk to, I'm just coming up with names now, Highland Baptist, and Highland Baptist doesn't even have a men's program. They do a men's Sunday where they do a choir thing. Well, you just discovered that nobody's doing anything on Saturday for the men. There's a gap. So now you can say, well, hey, we're going to start a men's fellowship on Saturdays. We're going to do health screenings. We're going to do music. We're going to do drama. We welcome you guys out. Not only have you created a new program, but you can go to Jerusalem. You can go to Highland and say, hey, I know you do Friday. I know you do Sunday. I'm going to do Saturday. So we're going to cross-promote everything together. Knocked out 15 birds with one stone. So you definitely want to think about things like that. Next. Could I have a product and customers in 90 days or less? Again, more for profit. But even on the nonprofit side, you want to think about your fellowship. You want to think about the parishioners. Hey, if I do this ministry that God has called me to, what am I looking at? Am I looking at a big edifice? Am I looking at a small edifice? Do I want to start in a storefront? Am I going to start it in my house? These are the kind of things you want to think about, because each place that you start a ministry is going to garner different results. So if you start a ministry in your home, the question becomes, well, who is that going to look like? What kind of people would I want to invite into my home? If you say you want to do a storefront, what area do I want to be in with this storefront? Do I want it to see 10 people? Do I want to see 20 people? On the flip side, with a for-profit, you want to think about that. What is the product? Now, in ministry, the product is Jesus. You're selling Jesus. But in a for-profit setting, you want to think about, what is your product? Are you selling service? So let's say you decide you want to do a call center. That's a service. So you're selling a service. Do you want to actually have a product? Something like we'll say an app, like because those are really popular, like an app. So I say my product is an app. What does that app do? Is that app, where's the gap? That's always the first question. If you don't learn nothing else from today's podcast, the question is always, where is the gap? Meaning, what's not being covered in the arena that you've been called to? What are people not focused on? What are people not doing? Always remember to try to fill a gap. Because if God has called you to something, there is a gap, meaning nobody's covering that particular area of the vineyard, but it needs to be covered because there is a major need, and God wants to use you to fill that need or fill that gap. The idea checklist was kind of exactly what the name implies. It's if you have an idea or a concept, those are the kind of questions you want to be asking yourself before you embark on the journey of doing a business plan or doing a marketing plan. Because you got to make sure it's a good idea. Now, again, when we talk about ministry, if God has truly called you to it, then it's not so much about, is it a good idea? The question becomes, how do I execute that God has given me? That's where people usually get lost in the ocean. Because, God gives them something, but they never take the time to study and research, which the Bible tells us study show ourselves approved. But they usually never take the time to do the research. The assumption is, oh, well, God has done all the work. So he gave me the concept, I'm just going to, just get out there and do it. Nah, not quite. He gives you the concept because it's like giving you a baby. And the baby, you still have to feed it, you have to change it, you have to clothe it, all that good stuff. So think about an idea or think about something that God drops to your spirit like a baby. And no, I raising kids and all that good stuff. I know women have a better ideology of this than men do, but we still partake in the baby raising process or the child rearing process. So again, whenever God gives you something, think about it as a baby. And that baby has to be nursed, it has to be fed, it has to be changed, it has to have attention, it has to have love. Whatever God gives you has the same ideology behind it. So whenever you get something, you want to go through the ideas that I threw out there to get the wheels turning, but then you want to get more specific. So these are the 10 questions you want to get more specific about. Now again, these will vary between for-profit and non-profit, but again, I'm giving you both because again, most of you will probably want to have an LLC at some point. So these are the kinds of things you want to make sure that you can answer whenever you decide that, you want to do an LLC. All right, so first question, after you've gotten out of the idea checklist, then you get into the 10 questions. So your first question is, what is the product? Now again, if you're in ministry, Jesus is the product. But how you sell Jesus becomes a question. Again, are you going to have a church? Are you going to have a nonprofit? Are you going to be an evangelist? You want to be an elder? what role are you going to play, and what does God call you to do? What is your product? Now, reciprocally, in the for-profit sector, you legitimately have to know what your product is. So we've used a couple of things. We've talked about the daycare. So her product is more of an intangible product. It's like the care of kids. So that's a little more intangible. But then you could have a tangible. When I first started my radio show, I remember I did an example of ketchup. There was this guy, we'll say his name is Jerry. Jerry has a child, and his child loves ketchup, but he doesn't like red ketchup. So Jerry goes, okay, well, my child loves ketchup when I have him blindfolded, because he can't see it. But he doesn't like the color red. So Jerry decided, he went to grocery stores, supermarkets, he could not find any other color for ketchup outside of red. So he saw the gap. The gap was there's only red ketchup. That's the gap. My son wants other colors of ketchup. So he discovered the gap, and he decided he wanted to create a product that was not red ketchup. It was all different colors of ketchup. So he identified his gap, and then he created a product based off that gap. So again, the gap was ketchup's only red in the stores. But my son loves ketchup, but he doesn't like red ketchup. So my solution to that problem is I'm going to create different colors of ketchup. So he created green, he created yellow, and that was his actual product. The product was different colors of ketchup for people who cannot either take the dye that's in red ketchup, or for kids who just don't like red ketchup. Same thing here. What is your product? You have to identify the gap, and then from that gap, offer the gap a solution. It's the easiest concept. It's typically how people get rich. It's a simple concept. Gap, solution. All right. Now, ultimately, you want to be able to answer that in 30 seconds or less. So when somebody says to you, what is your product? Well, my product is XYZ. You should be able to rattle it off in 30 seconds. Sound familiar? It should. It's an elevator pitch. Your elevator pitch should be 30 seconds or less. Ideology, stepping into elevator with Oprah or Steve Harvey, people that we hold in high regard, who can probably take your organization to a whole nother level. You step into the elevator, you have from the time y'all go from the ground floor all the way up to the penthouse, which is probably where they're going, to pitch your organization and get them more inquisitive about what you do and what your organization does. So that when they step off the elevator, their immediate thing is, you know what, I need to pull out my phone because I want to find out more about what Ricardo does with the leadership plan. Or I want to find out more about Jerry and this ketchup idea that he has. I want to know more about it. So, same ideology. Next question. What is the unique value in what you do? So we'll stick with Jerry because it's probably a good example. So with Jerry and the ketchup, it's unique because, again, he did the research. I cannot stress this enough. You have to do the research. He went out to grocery stores, he went out to supermarkets, and he discovered that there were no other colors of ketchup outside of red. So the uniqueness for him is his ketchup comes in different colors. And ultimately, there's places for him to go. That's another thing you want to think about. Where can your product go? Where can your organization go? So let's switch this back to the nonprofit side. You say God has called you to a men ministry. You decide to do your men ministry stuff on Saturday. Let's say you decide to start off with health screenings. So on Saturdays, you welcome the men in from the different churches to come in. You do health screenings. That alleviates one problem. As you do more research, you also discover that men are having a hard time finding new skill sets. So then you offer skill set classes. Hey, we're offering classes on, customer service. So you have an expert in the ministry, start in-house first. You speak to the people in ministry, your leadership team. They say, hey, I took a class or I've gone to college for customer service, so I understand it at a deeper level. So you say, hey, now we're going to add customer service classes to teach you how to work in a call center for our men. So you have places you can go. But again, you have to do the research. So there's a process to all this. Gap, solutions, research, better solutions, expansion. So you definitely want to keep all these things in mind. Next, what is your market opportunity? What problem are you solving? How large is the market opportunity? How many dollars are spent in it every year? How fast is it growing? Let's switch to the for-profit side. So again, you want to think about it. Market opportunity. Let's go stick with Jerry. Jerry realizes he has to do the research. What are the questions he's going to ask? One, who are the main distributors of ketchup? The first person that comes to my head is Heinz. So he knows he's up against Heinz. Then he's got to do some other research. Greater Value makes ketchup. After he decides who his actual competition is, then he has to do even more research to find out how much money are they making a year. Is this $1 billion industry? Is it $1 million industry? Things of that magnitude. So these are the kind of questions you want to ask in market opportunity. And really quickly in the nonprofit sector, you want, again, find out how many churches are in your area. What do those churches specialize in? Where is the gap? How can I fill that gap? Things of that magnitude. So again, it goes for profit and for nonprofit. Okay, so when we left off, we were talking about unique value proposition and the ideology of what makes you different from your competitors or the people that are also in your field. Then we got into market opportunity. So here are the questions you want to think about. And again, I use two different examples because there is your for-profit and there is your not-for-profit. So on the not-for-profit side, we were talking about Angela and the Jesus Children's Daycare, where her concept was having Christian daycares across the East and the West Coast. On the flip side, for the for-profit, we talk about Jerry, and I'm terrible with names. So we talk about the Jerry and the ketchup situation where he has, his son loves ketchup, but he doesn't like red ketchup. So Jerry realizes after he goes to supermarkets and grocery stores and discovers that there's no other color for ketchup outside of red. So he identifies the gap, and then his solution is, I'm going to create different colors of ketchup. So when you think about your market opportunity, which that is an example of market opportunity, where is the opportunity in the market you want to be in? So we'll go, these are the kind of questions you want to ask. What problem are you solving? Which is, when I say filling the gap, that's what that means. What is the problem that you notice, that you see? In the non-for-profit example, we see that Jerry realizes everybody may not be able to eat red ketchup, but they love ketchup. With his son, if he were to blindfold his son would love ketchup. He loves it. But to look at it, he won't eat it because it's red. So the opportunity was to create other colors of ketchup, because typically if one person has an issue with it, you will find other people who have the same issue. So what Jerry discovered in that example was that not only do people not like red ketchup, a lot of them cannot take the dye or the ingredient that turns the ketchup red, they can't take it. So that's another opportunity by which to fuel his product. Another question, how large is the market opportunity? So upon further research, Jerry realized that Heinz is bringing in millions to billions of dollars just on ketchup alone. So his market opportunity is huge, it's large. Next, how many dollars are spent on it every year? Now, these questions are questions that you can easily find on the internet. Yes. There is a trick to doing research on the internet. You definitely want to make sure that the site that you're looking at is reputable. You want to make sure that the site that you're looking at has actual facts. In Jerry's case, Jerry actually went to the Heinz website and he looked up their dividend packet. Typically for most companies, they have a link that you can go to that will give you all their information. What they made, who were their partners, what was invested, shareholders, dividends, all that good stuff. It's usually in annual earnings. Typically on their site, you'll see something that says something like annual earnings. You go on it as a packet, and they tell you all that good stuff. They have to have it by law. Next, how fast is that market growing? So again, Jerry found out his biggest competitor was Heinz. So he went in, he looked at Heinz books, he saw how much money they brought in, he looked at all their information to give him an idea of what he was up against. Now let's flip that and go to the nonprofit side. Yes, some of this stuff still applies to a nonprofit. So sticking with the example of the men's ministry at Mount Sinai that Tom thought he should do, you know, Tom looked at health screenings because that's the first thing he decided he wanted to do. Health screenings for men. You know, how big is that? How big is that industry? What kind of money's in it? Because that's a potential partnership that his church may have with the health screening, a certain hospital or a third-party company that does screenings and stuff. That's a potential partnership for his ministry. So you got to think like that. The goal is to get you to think about other ways, especially for ministry, because there are million-dollar ministries that are not generating that money from tithes and offerings. They're generating that money from the people that are in their parishioners who utilize certain services that they go and create partnerships with. So again, we were talking about Tom and the men's ministry and doing health screenings. He finds a third-party company that wants to sponsor the health screenings and give money to the ministry. That's a partnership he just created from doing research. So these are the kind of avenues we miss. Again, how fast is it growing? So he looked at a third-party company, the name of the third-party company, to see their year-end dividends and things of that magnitude, and used it in that package. It shows you what they did from year to year to show the growth. Stuff's already done for you. You just have to know where to look for it at. All right, next. How will this idea make money? So, of course, in Jerry's example with the ketchup, he'll make money because, the ketchup industry, after doing the research, is a billion-dollar industry. And because that particular part of the industry is open, it's an open road for him. So, all he has to do is make sure that he has the right product, that he packages it right, that he puts the right capital into it if he's needed, and then he should be good to go. On the flip side, with Tom and the men's ministry, forming that potential partnership with the screening company, again, may present the opportunity where they want to give money to his organization. Now, again, this is where 501c comes into play, because if he has his 501c3 and they're a medium to large company, they're probably trying to fulfill their social responsibility anyway, which means they're looking for some place to give money to so they can say, hey, we gave to a great cause, we gave to Mount Sinai, we donated to their ministry, we did health screenings, so on and so forth. So not only is he helping the men's ministry with the health screenings, he also has generated revenue outside of tithes and offerings to help fund his ministry. So these are the kinds of things you want to think about. Really quickly, what is your long-term strategy? This is a lot of times, I'll stay on the nonprofit side. Oftentimes, this is where ministries start failing because we don't have a 5-year plan. The ideology is, well, the Lord will do it all. God is good, but the Bible also tells us that faith without works is dead. So just because God has given you, put the work at your hand, you still not only have to have the faith that it can get done, you also have to put the work in yourself to get the job done. The vision is just to help you strategize as to where you're supposed to be going, because God has already shown you what the end result is. So now you have to create the steps to get you to the end result. Okay, so we finished everything. We talked about the idea checklist, the 10 questions. As you can see, they're all outlined up here. So here's my final thought on all of this. My biggest thing that I want to say to ministers and people in ministry is there has to be more than just a vision. Meaning you have to be willing to put in the work. You have to be willing to put in the time, because just because God has shown it to you, it's kind of in essence showing you the potential of what's written in the book as it pertains to your life. And I always use the example, there are going to be many people that get to heaven and God's going to say, hey, I had written that you were going to be a doctor, but because of your free will choices, you ended up being a manager at a plumbing company. Nothing's wrong with that. But we want to make sure that we maximize all that God has given us. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is not only recognize that God has given us a vision, but be ready to work that vision. And by working that vision, you want to do the research. You want to make sure that you understand the dynamics of what God has called you to. You want to make sure that you have the passion, or that you've tapped into the passion that goes along with the vision. Because I'm a firm believer that when God gives you a vision, there's a passion that you tap into, especially into a particular season, that will fuel you through those lonely nights and fuel you through those days when you just don't think you're going to make it. But you have to tap into that passion. So make sure that not only do you understand the vision, but you have tapped into the passion that will accompany that vision to make sure that it will come to pass. Because God has a plan for your life, you definitely want to make sure it comes to pass.